Hi Magento 2 developers. My name is Peter Britka. I'm a professional Magento 2 developer and I create Magento 2 tutorials. If this is your first time on my channel, please hit the notification bell so that you are notified whenever I release a new content, and you can also go to my website at www.peterbritka.com for more Magento 2 related content. I'm also available for online consulting, so if you have some Magento 2 related issue, go to my website and sign up for personal consulting or drop me an email and we can discuss your Magento 2 issues. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. In this video, I'm going to talk about the process of adding a simple product to cart. This information will be useful if you want to add a product to cart programmatically, or if you want to debug adding to cart if it doesn't work for some reason, or if you simply want to know what's happening behind the scenes. When I was in my first job position, this is something my colleague told me, that looking into the core code is something that will make you a good programmer. In this video, I'm not going to write much code. Everything is already prepared, and I'm going to explain everything on this product, which is a simple product, so we will be adding this product to cart. I will not go too much into detail, which means I'm not going to explain line by line what's happening, because there's a lot of methods that are involved in this process, but I will try to explain you all the important stuff. So I have this index controller where I injected a product repository interface or an instance of this interface and checkout model cart class, which is responsible for adding the product and saving the cart. In this execute method, I define the SKU of the product, then we load the product by using the product repository, and this array is the minimum that is needed if you want to add a simple product to cart. Here you see that I'm adding a quantity of 2. Then I just echo that the product has been added to cart, we save the cart, and below this line I iterate over the cart items and display the SKU and quantity which is in the cart. So really only these few lines are needed if you want to add a simple product to cart programmatically. Alright, so what is really happening behind the scenes in these two methods? Add product method on the cart model is the one that we will be looking into detail most of the time. So let's go to this cart model, and here is the add product method. First you see you have the product info argument, which can be either the ID of the product or it can be the instance of the product class, and request info, it can be either null or it can be an array, an int, or an instance of Magento framework data object. Here you see I also added some equals and var dump, so later when we run the code you will see what we have inside these variables. Now let's continue with the code. At first we'll try to load the product by this product info, so we can actually look inside the method. If it is an instance of the product class, it simply assign it to the product variable. If it is an int or string, it loads the product by the ID, and if anything goes wrong, this method throws an exception and it is caught on the higher level of the process. If everything goes good, an instance of the product is returned. So we have the instance of the product. Here we'll extract the ID, and if we have the ID, all this code is run. If not, an exception is raised. Otherwise, the execution continues here. Let's look at inside the block if we have the product ID. This line is where it all begins. So at first, we get the quantity from the request info. Basically, what it does, it returns an instance of data object class. We will see it if we go inside this method. So first, it tries to get the request. We can go in the get product request method, and it checks whether the request info is the actual instance of Magento framework data object. If it is so, then it only assigns it and returns. If it is numeric, which means that we only specified, for example, that we want to add 1 or 2 or any other number of products, it creates the instance of data object class from this quantity. And if it is an array, as it was in our case here, this params variable, it creates the instance of data object class with this request info. In any other case, it throws an exception. So we have the instance of Magento framework data object class. Let's go back. This is the instance of the data object class. Here we check the stock of the product and actually get the minimum quantity that is needed to add this product to cart. And if there is any minimum quantity, for example, sometimes you can set it in admin, here in this part. This is the minimum quantity that can be added to cart. Currently it is 1, but it can be any different number. It sets the minimum quantity on the request object and returns this data object class. So we have it here. Then this line just fires the checkout cart product add before event, so we can attach on this event and add our own logic if we need it. And this is the most important line in this method, which calls the add product method on the quote object. What actually happens behind the scenes when you create an order in Magento is that first Magento creates an instance of the quote class, and then later when the customer goes through the checkout process and clicks on the place order button, Magento internally converts the quote model to the actual order model and saves it to the database. I will continue with this add product method in a while, but let's continue in this method just to go through this whole process. If the result is a string, it means that we have an error message that we want to later display to the customer. Here we just get the redirect URL where we want to redirect the customer. We set it to the checkout session and throw an exception. Here we have another event that is fired and where we can attach our own logic. We set the last edit product ID to the checkout session and we just return from this method. Let's go to the add product method on the quote model, which is where all the logic is happening. We can call this method directly, but I still use the cart model because that's how it is done in Magento front end when you click on add to cart button. Okay, so we are still working with the request object, where again we just check if it is null or numeric and create the instance of the data object class. And here in this line we check if the request is the actual instance of the data object model, and if not, then an exception is raised. Then here Magento checks if the product is actually sellable. If it is not, then another exception is raised. A product is sellable usually if it is available, which means it is enabled in admin, and if we have enough of the quantity on stock. Here is the isSellable method, where you can see that it is actually possible to set skip sellable check flag on the catalog product property, which is an instance of catalog product helper. And the line which is the most important in this method is this line, where we check if the product is available, which goes further into the depth on the type instance of the product and calls the isSellable method on this type instance. Remember, we have different types of products, which are simple, virtual, configurable, bundle, grouped, and downloadable. So let's go to the isSellable method on the type instance, which goes to this abstract type class. And basically, it checks the status of the product and it has to be enabled. If the product is enabled, then it returns true and the product is sellable. We are back in the add product method inside the quote model. This is another important line where all the logic of preparing the products for cart is happening. Again, we need to go to the type instance class of the product and look for the prepare for cart advanced method. Again, we need to go to the abstract type, which is used in case of the simple product. Here is the prepare for cart advanced method, which calls prepare product method. This method deals with all kinds of custom options and product options, and in case of other types of products like bundle and configurable, I believe it also goes through the associated products of this product, but this is out of scope of this video tutorial, so I will skip all of this and I go to the part which is important. Here I edit one var dump of the super product config, which you will later see that it will be now for the simple product. Therefore, this whole code block will not be executed. Almost everything in this method is not used for the simple product. You will also see some var dumps here. Later, we don't have any options, so we also skip this block of code and we only set the quantity on the product and return the actual product as an array. So what this line of code really does, it returns an array of products that are cart candidates, or it returns a string in case of any error. And if there is the error, we just return the error and display it to the customer. Here we check if the cart candidates is an array, and if it is not, we create an array from it so we can iterate over it in this block of code. Here I edit an echo so you will see exactly which SKU is being processed at the moment. This line is important if we have a type of product which is added to cart with its child product. For example, a configurable product is added to cart as two products. One of them is a parent product with its SKU, quantity, and all kinds of other information. And then the child item holds the actual variant. In case of a shirt, for example, it holds the actual color and actual size. In case of a simple product, parent item is initialized to now in the beginning, so stick with parent will be now in any case for a simple product. Then we set this stick with parent item to the product, which is now in this case. Here we try to get a quote item from this product candidate by calling getItemByProduct on the quote model. Let's look at the method into detail. Here I would like to talk about the quote model and how it is saved inside database. A quote represents a shopping cart, and this shopping cart consists of multiple products that you can add to the cart, which are instances of quote item class. And if we want to see what we have inside the cart, we call getAllItems on the quote model, and we can iterate over them. Notice that this is an instance of quote item class, and product is an instance of catalog product model. We can look at the represent product method inside the quote item class. First, it tries to get the product on this quote item, and if it doesn't find the product, so if this item is not associated with any product, it returns the false, which means that the product or the product candidate that we are trying to add to the cart is not inside the cart yet. If we have a product which is, for example, a configurable product, this variable stick within parent will hold an instance of the quote item model, and if the current item that we are checking is the same as stick within parent item, we will continue here. If it is not, it means the currently tested item is not inside the cart yet. And if we found the item, then we compare the options, which can be size, color, or any other custom options. If the comparison is false, then this item needs to be added to cart. In other case, this method represent product returns true, and the tested item is inside the cart already. So this item will hold false if the candidate is not inside the cart yet. In any other case, it will hold an actual quote item. If it is false, we initialize the quote item, set the quote, set options like custom options, set the product, and add item to this quote. Add item only sets the quote on this item and sets it to the items collection. I would like to also show you the content of init method on the item processor. It returns an instance of the quote item model. So it creates it from the quote item factory, sets the store ID on this item, and return the actual item either here or here on this line. So if the item was false, then in this case we already have the item instance and we can add it to the items array. Remember, the parent item was initialized to now before this for each loop. So the first cart candidate is always marked as the parent item. And in case of a configurable product, for example, or any other type of product which has a parent-child relation, we set the relation here. Then we prepare the item inside the item processor class, which is here. What is important here is as the quantity on the item. Remember that item could have already been in the cart. For example, we could have had 3 pieces of the bag inside the cart and want to add 2 more. That's why we call add quantity and not set quantity. And here we also check the custom price, because sometimes we can request a special price and not the one that is set in admin, and we either set the price on the item, or in case of a custom price, we set the custom price on this item. And this is pretty much all, because here we only check for the errors. If we have an error, we just raise an exception. Here is another event that is fired, where we can attach our own logic. and this add product method returns the parent item, which is an instance of quote item model. So this is what was the content of this line. It was pretty much tough, right? If we want to save the cart into the database, we have to call the save method on the cart model. Let's look at it. I'm not going too much into detail of this method. Here I'd like to mention that it gets the billing and shipping addresses. In case that these addresses don't exist yet, Magento creates them. For example, let's look at the getBilling address method. It calls getAddress by type protected function, which iterates over the addresses collection of this quote model. If it finds it, then it returns the address, and if it doesn't find it, it creates a new instance of the quote address class, sets the address on this quote model, and returns the address. The same is being done for the shipping address. Then we call the collect totals method on the quote model, which is also another interesting method. I will probably create another explanation video just on this method. You will see it in a while that when we look at the shopping cart page in front end, you will see totals like subtotal, tax, there might be a discount, there might be some other kinds of totals, and the resulting price is a grand total. So what this method does, it iterates through all these totals, instances of totals collector class, and calculates the amounts of each total. And then we just save the quote on the quote repository class, and that is all. The quote is saved to database, and if we refresh the page, we can see the quote and the content of the cart on all other pages where we need it. I think it's time to see this code in action. So remember, again, we get the product, we set the parameters, which in this case we will add 2 pieces of this SKU in the cart. We call the add product method on the cart model, and we save it to the database. Right now I want to show you that my shopping cart is empty at the moment. After the refresh, it's still empty. This is the URL where I execute the code that I showed you. So refresh it. And let's go over these var dumps. Request info, you see that it was an array of quantity of 2, which is this one. And it actually and the var dumps you can find here. So we called the add product method on the card model. Request info was an array. Request data object was an instance of the data object model, which is this line here. You can see the property of quantity 2. Then when Magento called the prepare product method, super product config variable was now. It's here. I told you that most of the code of this method is not executed. Then this buy request, again the quantity was 2. Options, we had no options, which was called here in prepare options because we had no custom options of this product. Then this line, cart candidate, was called inside the quote model here. So you actually see that cart candidates array holds a single product, and this line product with this SKU was added to cart is called from the execute method on this line, and here we just display the content of the cart, which is SKU 24MB02 and quantity 2. If you want to see the content of the cart on the front end, refresh the page, and here we have two products. These are the totals I was talking about earlier. Subtotal was one of the totals, and since we have no tags at the moment, then the order total is simply the same as subtotal, but here you could have a tags, a discount, and all kinds of other totals. If we call this code one more time, another two products will be added to the cart, so you see now the quantity has changed to 4. Refresh the cart page. You see the quantity is 4 and order total is 160 euro. You also see that a discount has been added, which is another kind of total. Alright, so I hope you have an insight of how a product can be added to cart programmatically, and you understand at least some of the key concepts that are happening behind the scenes when we add a product. Don't forget that I'm available for an online consulting, so if you have some Magento 2 issue that you would like to discuss with me, or you would like to get an insight of what's going on in the Magento core code and want me to explain you how it works, please visit my website and sign up for the personal consultation or drop me an email, and I will be happy to consult any Magento 2 issues with you. That was all for today's video, and see you in some next tutorial.